From the earth to the cross, my debt to pay. From the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky, Lord, I lift your name on high. Amen. We're going to be in Exodus chapter number 4 this week. The last time that we was in the Exodus study, we were talking about the I am. Remember? When Moses said, who should I tell them that you are, God? What is your name? When they ask me, and he says, I am that I am. And so we went into that, and we taught on that the last time we were together. So this time we're going to move on, and we might have touched on this a little bit before, but we're going to touch on it a little bit again in Exodus chapter 4, because that I am statement was in Exodus chapter 3. So, to backtrack a little bit, Moses was, as everyone remembers, Moses was born in a difficult time when the Egyptian boys, baby boys, were being aborted, and the girls were kept, and because of the possibility of a war breaking out. Remember all that? So, but Moses' mother and father didn't want to abort the baby or kill the baby, so they saved him and they put him in a basket, and then the Lord did a miracle there with the faith. And then he grows up in the palaces. We went over all this. I'm just kind of recapping a little bit to bring us back up to speed. He grows up in the palaces of Egypt, trained in the things of Egypt, as we learned from Stephen in the book of Acts, and then also from the book of Hebrews. We looked at all that. It talked about Moses' young life. He gets up to 40 years old, and he thinks he's going to go out on his own with all the things that he knows and deliver these people. And the first day it basically goes bad. He kills a man and goes. He has to run for his life and becomes a stranger in the desert, the Arabian desert. So now he's in the desert for 40 years, humble. Now he's 80 years old, and he's a humble man. And now God says, okay, I'm ready to use you. But now he's not ready, right? So he says he's got all these excuses why now he can't be used of the Lord. So he says, well, they're not going to believe me. This is where we were last week. They're not going to believe me when I come. Who am I to tell them that you are? And he's like, tell them I am that I am. I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the self-existent one. Okay? From the beginning to the end. Okay? So we went over all that. So Moses, where we pick up Moses at, is still in this state of arguing with the Lord about his call. Has anyone ever argued with the Lord about what the Lord wants you to do?
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I heard Roger say, yeah, I didn't see his hand. 5, 6.
Didn't argue, but I told
7.
him what my plan was.
Huh?
So I didn't argue, but I told him what my plan was.
Yeah, 8.
That didn't go well.
Yeah, that's called back talking. Yeah. This is what I think I'm going to do, God. That's arguing, yeah. So, in the nicest way. So many people here have not wanted to actually fulfill what God's plan is for their life. Okay? Moses didn't either. He did at one point when he was at his strongest, but God didn't want him at his strongest. He had some issues at his strongest. And he didn't, God wanted, this was going to be such the greatest delivery of the Bible that's going to last all the way. This covenant between Moses, the Mosaic covenant, is going to last all the way up until Jesus. The law and the things that Moses is going to do and bring to the people within these next 40 years is going to last for a long, long, long time. So it's going to have to be a good one. And God has a real good plan. So God wasn't ready for him at age 40. But God's ready for him now. But he says, I can't do nothing. I'm the wrong guy. I done tried this before. It didn't work. Right? But this time, it's not at his will. It's at God's will. And I understand this. I've been here, been there, done that. I mean, most Christians have. Because what happens is, God will let you in on a part of the plan to get you ready. And He puts it out there in your heart. And you begin to think about it and mull on it. And then you get excited about it and want to run out and perform it. Right? But that's you. And sometimes He says, well, I know you have a zeal and you're ready to go, but there's still some more training because we don't have the patience. So, this is where Moses is at. Chapter number 4, verse 1. And Moses answered and said, But behold, they will not believe me, nor will they hearken unto my voice, because we talked about this a little bit before, that he already tried this, and it didn't work. And they will say, The Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said unto him, What is in thy hand? And he said, A rod. Well, he was a shepherd. It's funny that God uses shepherds all through the Bible. David was a shepherd, right? Jesus talked about sheep. He used shepherds all through the Bible. Abraham was a shepherd. Isaac was a shepherd, right? Jacob was a shepherd. The 12 tribes were shepherds. And now, what does God train him as? A shepherd. Why? He's going to be taking care of God's people. He needs to know how to be a shepherd. He was a politician, but politicians don't always take care of God's people the right way, do they? Sometimes they have their own interest at hand. But a shepherd, he wants to take care of the sheep, or he should be. Okay? So he says, What is in thy hand? Verse number 3, and he said, Cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent. This would be like a bad dream to me. Right? He says, throw your rod on the ground, and it becomes a snake. I'm like, ah! Run the other way. And Moses fled from before it. And he did run the other way. He wasn't a tough guy, was he? And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thy hand, and take it by the tail. This must have been some encounter. And so God's trying to show Moses that I'm going to be with you, and I'll do the signs before Pharaoh. Don't worry about it. And it became a serpent, and Moses fled from before it. Verse 4, And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thy hand, and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand, and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand, that they might believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee. And the Lord said, Furthermore, Put now thy hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out again, his hand was leprous as snow. And he said, Put thy hand in thy bosom again. And he put his hand into the bosom again, and plucked it out of his bosom. And behold, it turned again as the other flesh. So God was showing him, I have power not over only over the wood and the animals, to make of this wood this animal, but also to over your body and their bodies. I have power. So he puts his hand in his coat, and he pulls it out, and it's withered and dead, as it was is dead. And he said, put it back in there. He put it in, and it was healthy and whole again. God said, I will show these signs. I will be with you. Because God is wanting to make here a great deliverance. He's wanting to do something that's never been done before. And we're going to get to why this was so... remember, these were slaves. And Moses was just a nobody now. He was a washed up politician that had been living in the desert for 40 years, listening to the sheep bath. At this point. And he's going to go against one of the greatest world powers with a stick and a bunch of slaves that don't know how to fight. They only know what they're supposed to do is work. And God's going to use this man and this stick to deliver every single one. And he tells Moses, and when you go to talk to Pharaoh, and Moses knows these guys. Moses knows these pharaohs. He lived with them. They were kinfolk at one time. He said, when you go talk to them, he's not going to let them go. Okay? So let's go down to verse number 8. And it shall come to pass, they will not believe thee, neither hearken unto the voice of the first sign, that they will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall come to pass, if they don't believe also these two signs, neither hearken unto thy voice, that thou shalt take the water of the rivers and pour it upon the dry land, and the water which thou takest out of the river shall become blood upon the dry land. He said, go get a cup of water out of the Nile, because this is where their life source was. And show them, you think you're so strong of a nation? It's just, you can't, it's blood. This is the next sign. So God's with him now. God's going to guide him. So now Moses, he's seeing the signs. He makes it. God says, okay, I'm going to be with you. This is not you, this is me here. Here's the signs. Then Moses has another objection. Verse number 10. Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. He said, I am not a public speaker. I don't know how to do this. You want me to be a leader of a people. I can't lead the people. Even if you give me, even if I show them the signs that you are with me, I can't even get the words out of my mouth to tell them. Right? Whatever it is, I don't know if he had a stutter problem or he just couldn't formulate his words or articulate the right words to make them sound right. But whatever it was, he felt inadequate to do the job. And that's what I think, that's when God can use you. Because 40 years earlier, Moses said, I'm the man for the job, period. And then after the first day, he got run out of the job. Now 40 years of being humble in the wilderness, and he's a broken man. And God says, now I'm ready for you, Moses. He's like, I'm 80, right? I'm 80 years old, and I can't talk good. God says it's okay. Right? And the Lord said unto him, Who hath made man's mouth? Why do you argue with God? Or who maketh the dumb, or the deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? Didn't the Lord open up a man's eyes, as we heard about in the message a few weeks ago on Sunday morning? Verse number 12. Now therefore, the Lord's given him a little lecture there. Right? Do you like lectures from the Lord? Do you know that you never get too old to be lectured by the Lord? Moses is 80 years old, and he's getting lectured by the Lord. The Lord's telling him, Who do you think made a man's mouth? Don't you think I can untie your tongue if I wish to? Or to make you speak? Or to make the blind to see? Or the dumb to speak? Yes, sir, the Lord. Yeah, or donkey. Verse 12. Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. And he said, O my Lord, send I pray thee by the hand of him who thou wilt. You know what he's saying there? Let me put that in plain English. Choose somebody else, God. I can't do it. Please, Lord, anybody else but me. He feels so inadequate. Here's the problem. It's coming next verse. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. Moses better get his life in gear. God been working on him for a long time. God already chose him. God already made a decision to choose him. And Moses, he done said, Lord, they're not going to hear me. I don't know what your name is. And then Moses done said, Lord, when I come, I don't have any kind of miracles or anything. And God says, okay, pick up the snake and pour out the water and put your hand in your jacket. And he says, and then he says, I can't do it. I just can't do it, Lord. I can't. And God says, I will tell you what to speak exactly. You just go. Because God had done made his choice. I don't know why God chose Moses. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of the faith of his parents, but God done made a choice, and he ain't changing his mind on this choice. He says, Moses, you're going to go, and you're going to like it. Now get out there. Right? I've been there. You think that I just said Lord and ran to the pulpit and said, Lord, I want to be the preacher? No, I didn't. I resisted. I resisted, and then the Lord pushed me, and I resisted, and the Lord pushed me, and I resisted, and he pushed me again, and things until my life went downhill, and I got sick, and things weren't working right, and then I resisted, and then I surrendered. Okay? And then I surrendered, and I began the training process with Dr. Smith up there. I was working with the youth and everything, and then I went back in to work at the restaurant and help my mom and get it back up and going. And then that's when I got the phone call the one time from Dr. Smith, and it was the youth director, and he's like, Jamie, where are you? And I'm like, I'm cooking at the diner. Because Preacher Smith allowed me to go from 6 in the morning till 12, and then I will work from 12 until whenever I got done with my job that day. And we'd already agreed on this, but for whatever reason, well, I know what the reason. I know what the reason is. God had a timeline, and God had a plan, and I wasn't I wasn't going to make the timeline if he didn't get on me. You know that? God's got a timeline and God's got a plan. And He's going to push you into what you need to get done. Do you know that? Because it's 400 years, says the self-same day that the children of Israel came out of Egypt. God had a timeline, didn't He? And Moses needed to get with the plan. That 400 years is coming up pretty quick. And we won't know. We didn't know the plan, but God knew the plan. Just like the return of Jesus is coming up soon. We don't know the plan, and God's probably saying to us right now, get it in gear, folks, because the Lord's coming quickly and we need to start gathering in for the kingdom. Why else would we be getting these evangelistic people coming up and telling us to go witness the Muslims? Right? I don't think it was just because they were bored. So, yeah, I get the phone call and then Preacher Smith says, Gentry, are you a preacher or a fry cook? Click. Hung up the phone. Man, I've never been so mad in my life. I've got a slow fuse. I'm a boiler. I boil for a little while, but when the steam is built up, the pot breaks and the lid blows. And I don't blow my top much, but when I blow it, it's a good one. It's a doozy. Man, I started kicking. It's a temper tantrum, what it was. Kicking stuff and throwing stuff, and my mom comes back. And she's like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, I ain't going to let that old man talk to me that way. And I'm tearing up stuff. And she says, now, Jamie, settle down. I'm like, I ain't settling down. I ain't letting nobody. I don't care who he is. And, man, I was mad. I was mad. And she said, now, who led you to Christ? I said, He did. She said, now who's training you to be a preacher? I said, He is. She said, don't you think you ought to listen to him? I don't want to listen to him. And I thought about it for a second. And this is exactly what happened. I thought about it for a second. And it wasn't him. It was Jesus. And I thought, when I stopped, and I thought about it. She said, just calm down. And she started to reason with me about who he was. And then I stood still for a second and thought about it. And I felt, it was like I didn't really see anybody, but it was just in my mind. Jesus sitting on His throne saying, if you don't go now, you ain't going. You ever have one of those? And I took my spatula over and I said, Mom, you're on your own. And she said, I'll be all right. She said, go do what God's called you to do, son. I said, I got to. I said, I'm not coming back. She said, okay. And I left and went, and that's when God ordained me and put me in the ministry and began working full-time at the church. And God had a plan because He was going to bring me down. He was going to bring me down here and start a church. And he had His timeline, and He knew refugees were going to come in 2014 from ISIS, and He was going to send me there, and He had a plan. And I could have been lollygagging all this time. If God would, or maybe God would have got mad and said, if you're not going to do what I do, then you're out of here, boy. Right? If you're not going to be a part of the plan, there ain't no sense in having you down in the game. I'm taking you out of the game, and you can just come up here and sit with me. He could have did that. I believe if you're not doing what you're called to do, God can very easily take you out. Does that mean you're unsaved? No. It just means what earthly good are you if you're not being a witness for Him? If you're going the wrong way. I've known people that have been called to the ministry and didn't fulfill that call. And God did take them out. I have. Do I think that they went to hell? No. I think they went to heaven. They were saved people. They just did not want to do what God called them to do. And He had a plan. So when it says in verse 14, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, that's a strong statement. God was getting in Moses' face and saying, come on, if you don't get with it, we're going to have big issues. And He said, is not Aaron the Levite thy brother? I know that he can speak well. And also, behold, he cometh forth to meet thee. God had already put him in motion. This is something, Moses has got all these things. God had already sent his brother Aaron, who has a political voice, to go help Moses. So he's worrying about things that he don't even need to worry about. God's already provided in His plan. And when he seeth thee, he will be glad in his heart. And thou shalt speak unto him, and put the words in his mouth. And I will be with thy mouth, and with his mouth, and will teach you what ye shall do. And he shall be thy spokesman unto the people. And he shall be even as he shall be to thee instead of a mouth. And thou shalt be to him instead of God. He says, I'm going to speak to you, Moses, and you're going to speak to him. And he's going to stand up and say, thus saith the Lord. And you're going to stand there with your mouth shut, because you done told me you can't open it, but you're still going to stand there. He's still making him do it, isn't he? With that rod in your hand, just like I told you, and I'm going to use you. And these people knew Moses. Amen? These Egyptians knew Moses. They knew him 40 years ago and wondered, where did Moses go? Now 40 years later, this old man comes out, 80 years old. They all going to know who he is. He was one of them. And he's going to go before them and say, the God of our fathers, the Hebrews, told me to come. But he's not going to speak it. He's going to be mimicking the words to Aaron. Tell them, the God of our fathers said we need to go into the wilderness and worship for 3 days. And Aaron said, this is what they said. And then they'll turn around and walk out. Let's continue here. Verse number 17. And thou shalt make this rod take this rod in thy hand, wherewith thou shalt do signs. And Moses went and returned to Jethro his father-in-law, and said unto him, let me go, I pray thee, and return unto my brethren which are in Egypt, and see whether they be yet alive. And Jethro said unto Moses, go in peace. Jethro says, I know God's got a call on you. Go. Go do what God's told you to do. Whew. Big stuff right here. I want to give you just a little bit of background. We'll probably get done just a little early tonight. Sissy, could you pull up our picture? We believe that the Pharaoh that was during this time was Ramses the Great. Don't know that for sure. Even the movie with Charlton Heston in it, they said it was Ramses the Great. And the reason why we think that it is, you have to go back to Exodus chapter 1. Turn back just a minute with me to verse number 11. Exodus 1:11, therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Well, this is the guy that you're looking at on the screen is Ramses the Great, or Ramses the Second. His father was named Seti the First, and one of these guys, either Seti the First or Ramses the Great, was the one who we believe. Now, if you read history, there's going to say there is no evidence that there were any Hebrew slaves in Egypt. But we've got evidence right here. None of the historians are going to back up anything that the Bible says. They're throwing it out. But we have evidence. And then even like when we talk about back in Genesis, the shepherds were an abomination to Egypt. And we have the history to back that up, that there was a Hyksos that were the shepherd kings who tried to take over Egypt during a certain dynasty, during this time, right before this time. So we can put the pieces of the puzzle together, but there's no records of slave labor, they said, of the work. But I mean, if this guy, they say that this guy Ramses was the greatest leader in all the dynasty of Egypt. And they say that he was a master builder, and that he was the one who completed the city of Ramses, which is the capital, in his honor. This is when he's a young man. Now, I watched a show last week, not even thinking about this. We watched it at the house. Show the next picture. Look at this old guy on the right, on your right-hand side here. We were watching a show, me and the family, I know it's kind of weird, about mummies and Egyptian mummies. Did y'all watch that? This guy on the right is Ramses when he died at age 96. He was one of the longest, maybe the longest ruler of Egypt, because he ruled Egypt from the time he was 15 years old until he was 96 years old. I want to read just a little bit about what the historians say. They found, in the 1800s, they found these tombs. There was some Egyptian Arabic men who were raiding the tombs. There was a scholar who, I don't know where he came from, maybe England, or he was
From America.
America?
Yeah.
He figured out the code of hieroglyphics, and he said they had found a headband with writing on it, and the headband, he said, this is a king's headband. And he's dealing with this guy in the marketplace, and he's like, where did this come from? They wouldn't tell him. Well, finally, he keeps trying to negotiate, tell me where this is, because they couldn't find the burial ground of the kings of Egypt, the pharaohs. They couldn't find, they've never been able to find these. They were hid. Well, finally, they get the law involved and the Egyptian Office of Antiquities, and they go and they grab these two guys and they say, if you don't show us the place, you're under arrest. So they took them to the place, and they found all the kings of Egypt, all the pharaohs, in perfect mummy. They look at the design there. I mean, it looks like a guy. They knew embalming, and they perfected it. 4,000 years later, this guy's still embalmed, or whatever, how many ever years it is.
So
Man, look.
That's like the actual person.
That's the person right there, Ramses.
And that's his hair too. So,
from the days of Moses. These people were with it. These Egyptians, these were smart people to build these things. The picture, go back to that other picture. This was built during the days of Moses. It's still standing. Look at the work that was done. We can't build a house that lasts 50 years before it falls apart. These guys knew what they were doing. In the Bible, Joshua was a stone cutter. We don't know that he hadn't worked on that right there. Very possible. I'm going to read just a minute here of this, talking a little bit about the glory of Ramses. Because when we're talking about Moses here, this shepherd boy, this shepherd old man, he's going to be going in against these people. He don't have an army. He's only got a stick and some signs. And he can't speak, and he's got his brother. I can understand where he's hesitant and feeling inadequate to go. Right? I'm just going to read a little bit. Ramses II, alternative spellings, okay? His name means the keeper of harmony and balance, strong and right, elect of Ra. Ra was the god of Egypt that they said chose Ramses to be the leader of Egypt, okay? He was known in between 1292 BC, who claimed to have won the decisive victory over the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh. This is what put him on the map. He went out with Seti, his father, and he began at 15 years old to train as a military man. By the time he was 25 years old, he became co-heir of the kingdom and reigning Pharaoh. But he had already been living as the leader of the military all this time. See what Moses is going up against? The other people that was the strongest army was the Hittites, and whoever controlled this area of Kadesh was the strong. It's like between us and Russia. Whoever wins in Iraq is the stronger people. You see, why is Russia in the Middle East? Because they want to flex their muscles to the U.S. and say, hey, we kicked out ISIS. And we say, no, we kicked out ISIS. We're stronger than you. Everybody's over there fighting, trying to flex muscles. Well, these guys were the same. Egypt was trying to flex their muscles and say, we're going to win the Kadesh. Because it was a faraway place from them. And whoever could control that was the stronger people. Well, they say that the battle ended up as a truce. But he claims the victory. He went back to Egypt and said, they didn't whoop us, and we won. But they said that there was a peace treaty made between Egypt and Ramses and the king of the Hittites. And these weren't small armies. These were like 1 unit, 20,000 men. These were huge armies. This wasn't a couple shepherds in a tent like Abraham. These were mega powerhouses fighting against each other. And God's calling a shepherd from the woods to come up and lead this people out from under this guy? Well, I think I would probably say, yeah, God, probably bad idea. But God's going to do it. And God's going to do it so everybody in the world sees these are my people. And even Ramses the Great couldn't lay his hand on them. He's got building everywhere you put your foot in Egypt, there's something about Ramses. He wanted to make sure in North Egypt and South Egypt, all along the Nile River, there's temples and statues and government buildings all talking about his military victories, what kind of guy he was in the city of Per-Ramses that we see in the Bible in Exodus chapter 1 verse number 11 that says that the Hebrew slaves built that city. It was a military city. It was where they went. It was a pleasure city. For it was beautiful, the most glorious. But God says, okay, I got a plan and I'm bringing them out. So this is, I just wanted you to see and hear a little bit of this history. So you know that when we're reading the Bible, yeah, God spoke and God did this, and yeah, a couple guys here, and it wasn't like that. This is one man going up against the hundreds of thousands of soldiers that are in the command of this guy and all the force of Egypt. And there wasn't anybody stronger than this guy, not even the Hittites. So this is the first recorded. The Battle of Kadesh is the first known peace treaty in world history. This is a big deal. What if God called us to do something major? How would we feel? We got just a couple minutes. Just how would you feel if God said, I'm going to use you to do something big? There's faith and fear are right there together. We have to overcome the fear, and we have to overcome what people think to do what God's called us to do. Because there's peer pressure, people that are our peers and thinking, why would God use that person or this person? We have to overcome those things to say, well, God used these guys. And it was God. It was His choice. So it's just a matter of, are we going to surrender to what God's will is and say, yeah, God, I'll do it. I'll do my part. I think we should, whatever that may be. So, yes. What do you do? So like I said, if God's calling you, there will be consequences. If Moses didn't move, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. God might have said, Moses, you're done, son. I done put up with you long enough. Let's get on with it or get out. Right? He could have, but he didn't. So, praise God. Yeah, don't mess with God. He's a loving father, but he sure is tough. He's a tough dad. He loves us so much. He will whip you if he's got to. Stevie, it's time to go home. Let's close in prayer. Would you do that?
Dear Lord, please help us not to act like Moses and not to try and go against God's will, Lord, and make up excuses, Lord. And help us to go home with a good attitude, Lord. And Lord, please help us to be safe, Lord, and help all the very pressed, Lord. And help us to sleep on Jesus' name.
Amen.